You are all able to see my screen? Can anyone confirm, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
right. Are you able to see my slide when I go into the presentation mode? Can you confirm that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah. Good morning, students. So let's begin the class for today.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yes. All right. So this is where I think we stopped in the last class. We were talking of the system, database system environment, right? So I told you there is a particular way in which you have to draw this diagram, and I had taken, I had shown you how it can be drawn and how you can proceed from where you should start and how you have to proceed. So I thought I'll also share with you all a PPT slide of the same. So the first thing that you'll have to do is to write down the users. See, you have to join in using your BMS IT ID. Rahmatullah, I'll not be able to admit all of you. When you are joining through BMS IT ID, I don't have to admit you. You can join automatically. But if you're coming through some other mail ID, then this is going to be an issue. I will not be able to admit each one of you when I'm in the presentation mode. We'll pass this information to others who are there. Okay. So I was trying to explain to you all how do you write this diagram, and in the last class I had also shown to you how this particular diagram can be written. So once again, I just want to make sure that we just take a recap on that. The first thing that you have to do is put down all the users. So in the horizontal way. So I said DBA staff is a user, casual users we have application programmers, and then we have parametric users. The same thing I had shown you in the last class. I had written down so that you will understand how we can write it. Okay. So I told you the other day, don't start from any direction or anywhere of this and try to end somewhere else. You will go wrong, because if you understand this diagram and try to write it down, you will not go wrong. Otherwise, you'll tend to forget and you will not know what to write where. And this is a very important question. They may ask you as to what are the different components of the database system, right? So users, when we have, these are the users, so we put down the users. DBA staff is one user, casual users, application programmers, and parametric users. So now, what does a DBA do? I'm just giving you a quick recap on where we stopped. Okay. So what do the DBA do? They write the DDL statements, and they are also writing the privileged commands. Now, this DDL commands, we have a separate DDL compiler which is going to compile the DDL statements, and then I said they are all getting stored into a data dictionary or the system catalog here. Then we have the privileged commands. Let us leave it at that. Then I told you break this figure into two parts, the top half and the bottom half. Okay, first we will be writing only the top half of the diagram, and then we will go into the bottom half of the diagram. Casual users, they are going to write the interactive query. Now these query are going to be compiled by the query compiler, and then they get into the query optimizer, and then we have the optimized queries at this point. We'll stop at that again. Again, we go into the application programmers. So the application programmers, what they are going to do? They are going to write the application programs. Right? So once they write these it is application programs, not programmers. They write the application programs, and then it is passed through a pre-compiler. Now, when I say application programs, what will happen? This application program is going to have some high-level language program statements like C statements. It will also have some queries. That means in the form of a DML statement, insert statement. It may have some update statement, things like that. Now, when both these two different types of statements cannot be compiled by the same compiler, or right? So you have a C compiler separately, which is going to compile your C statements. You have a DML compiler, which is going to compile the DML statements separately. So when it comes to this pre-compiler will try to separate out the host language statements and the DML statements. So those separate statements gets compiled separately by the two different compilers, and then what you get as an output is your compiled transactions. All right. So this compiled transaction is directly going to be used by the parametric users. Right now, you have the DDL privileged commands by the DBA. You have the optimized query by the casual users. You have the compiled transactions by the application programmers, and also the parametric users who are making use of these compiled transactions. All this together, look at this, we have put a bullseye. So all this together will enter into your runtime database processor. Now, this runtime database processor is a runtime engine, or you can call it as a database engine, which is going to execute the queries, whatever you have given. So it could be a query, or it could be a command by the DBA staff. It could be the optimized query by the casual user. It could be the compiled transaction by the application programmer. It could be the canned transactions which are accessed by the parametric users. So the queries can come from any source, okay, or any set of users rather. All these queries will get into your runtime database processor. This runtime database processor is one which is responsible for executing your queries and giving back the results to the different users. Now, this runtime database processor, if you see here, there are other modules which are supporting this database processor in order to execute the query. So we have something called as a concurrency control module. You require a concurrency control module always in a DBMS, as I told you, because there can be multiple users who are accessing the database simultaneously. So you should not have any errors for both the users. You should not be providing any kind of errors. So that's why concurrency control module is required. And then you have a backup or recovery system. Why do you need a backup? You need a backup because if there is going to be any kind of failure in between, then the database should be able to come back to its initial state. So you need a backup module or a recovery module. And there is also a stored data manager which is going to store all the queries that are going to get processed. You have a stored database, right? All your input output from the database gets stored here. Now, this runtime database processor also uses your data dictionary to get any kind of information about the database. If it wants any information in order to process or in order to execute your query, it will access the data dictionary or the system catalog and take that particular information from there. So all your look at this, all the DBA commands, queries and transactions, they all come from the different set of users, get into your runtime database processors. So the runtime database process will actually execute the query and give back the results to the different kind of users. So this is how you should write it. As I told, see this diagram as two different halves, the upper half and the lower half. Okay. So upper half tells you what different users, how they are going to interact with the DBMS. That is what the upper half of the diagram tells. The bottom half, or the bottom half of the diagram, it shows how internally what is happening within the database in order to process the query that you write. What exactly happens? So that is what is shown in the bottom half of the diagram. So this is about the components that are there, or that is required in the database system. Any doubts so far? Any doubts, anyone, in this part of the presentation? I hope there are no questions, so let's proceed. Right. Next, we move on to database system utilities. Okay, what is a utility first of all? Now, most of the DBMS will have database utilities, which is going to help the DBA or see the DBA is a main person in your DBMS. So the DBA cannot work all alone. He needs lot of other utilities. So what is the utility? Something that is going to help the DBA to manage the database system. So when you provide utilities, these utilities should be able to provide some kind of functions. Okay. So what are the common functions that these utilities can provide? So one important function that the utility provides is called this loading. Loading is an important function provided by one of the utility. Why is this utility used? Loading is used in order to load some files. So you should be able to load some text file, or it could be some kind of sequential files. So when you try to load this any file, the file will be in a certain format. Okay, now you should have some specific format. There is some specific format in the database, so you call that as a source text format of the source file and format of the destination file, or you can call it as the target file. So then when both these formats are specified to the database, it will usually convert or transform one format to the other once the files are loaded. So loading is an important function which is provided by a loader, which is a utility which is required to load the files. So DBA cannot be working all alone. He needs supporting staff, is it not? So supporting staff could be in terms of people, it could be in terms of modules, it could be in terms of a lot of software. So it could be again in terms of these utilities which are going to provide some important functionality. So loader is one important utility. What is the functionality of the loader? Is to load the files into the DBMS. So when we load a file, the file can be in a different format. So the loader will also take care of transforming this source file format into the destination file format. Both the formats will be given to the DBMS already, right? The next important functionality or the utility functionality is you should have a utility which is going to help you to provide this backup. Why do you need a backup? We always take a backup of the database, dump it into some file or some wherever, whatever storage is provided, we try to dump all the backup into that. Why this backup is required? Backup is required mainly because as I told you a little while ago, that if there is going to be some major failure, if the database crashes, something server goes down, something happens, then you should be able to restore the database. That means bring back the database to the initial initial stage or the initial level. That is very important. You cannot leave the database as it is hanging somewhere. Okay. So incremental backups are also used, where you are not going to take the whole backup every time. Only from the last backup, whatever you have taken, from then onwards, whatever changes you have made, you can take that particular backup alone. That is called as an incremental backup. It's very complex, but it saves the memory, because every time I don't have to rewrite the entire database files. Is it? Another important function, or the function that one of the utility has to provide, is the database storage reorganization. There is always a need, there may always be a need to reorganize a set of database files. Why do you have to reorganize it? Maybe I want some better performance. Maybe I want to increase the speed. Maybe I want to have a good response time. Once I give the query as a user, I want the responses quite fast. So these are some of the requirement why I need a data file reorganization. That means I want to add some extra storage. All these are nothing but you try to reorganize it. So there should be some utility which should be able to provide this kind of reorganization. The next important function that the utility should provide is performance monitoring. So that's what I told you already. If I'm giving a query and if I have to wait for one full day, then nobody will use my database, is it not? So my response is that is also one aspect of the performance, wherein I give a query and you expect the result in a reasonably faster time. You need not, it may not be giving you immediately, but only reasonably faster. You expect your responses. If it is not going to give you a response immediately, then obviously we will lose interest in that particular database, or we may not try to use it at all as a user. Okay, so these are the important utilities that should be there in the DBMS in order to help the DBA to manage and coordinate the DBMS, right? So loader, backup, taking a backup, database, storage reorganization, and performance monitoring. These are the different utilities that the DBA uses. The DBMS provides to the DBA, right? If you have any questions, please stop me. I will also be stopping and asking you then and there. Right. So next, a couple of other tools that are required. All these are also a part of utility only. So tools. See, again, I told you that database or a DBMS cannot be managed manually. Fully, you cannot manage it manually. You may need some kind of automation to be done. Now, when you talk of automation, obviously, we have to have some kind of tools. Now, case tools are used in very important set of tools is your case tools. All of you would have studied already case tools somewhere in software engineering or in your graduation also. This case tools plays a very important role in the database system. When you it's actually a set of tools. When you talk of case tools, it is a set of tools which will provide different functionalities. You have, for example, a case tool for designing the database. You have a case tool for generating the reports. You have some case tools for optimizing the queries. So like this, you have case tools for analyzing the requirements. So like this, you have an analyzer. We call it as an analyzer. We call it as a report generator. We call it as a query optimizer. So like this, there are names given for the tools depending on what functions they are trying to do. Okay, so these tools are very important, and as also given here, data dictionary is again a very important it's again a tool because it acts as a repository to store all the information about your DBMS. In one of the class, I told DBMS actually it is self-explanatory. Why it becomes self-explanatory? Because you are storing everything in the system catalog, or your data dictionary which is there in the DBMS is also helping you to know more about the database, right? So case tools and data dictionary is an important utility, you can call it as. Next, application development environments. So when it will provide you certain, you have certain application development environment which will help you to develop some applications. Again, you cannot do everything manually from the scratch. You make use of certain tools. So this application environment, development environment is one such tool again. So it includes a facility that will help you in designing the designing database. It will help you in GUI development. It helps you in querying, updating, and performance. So all these are the various ways in which your application can be developed using a automation or using a particular tool. For example, you have Power Builder or this JBuilder and all these things. Communication software. So if your database is located in some remote place, and then you are trying to communicate through some terminals or through some workstations, then you get connected to this database through some communication hardware, or it can be communication software. You have JDBC systems, ODBC, all these things help you to connect to the database. Any doubts? Any questions on this? We were talking so far about utilities. Okay, you are not able to change, see my change in the slides. Is it so?
Yes, ma'am. You are not able to see that.
What are you seeing now? Which slide are you seeing, please? Can you tell me?
Tools,
Application environment.
Yeah, that is where I am. Were you able to see the database system environment, the first figure?
Yes, ma'am.
And then I changed it to database system utilities. I came to this loader slide and all. Were you able to see that?
No, ma'am.
We couldn't see
It did not
database
see,
system
ma'am.
utilities, ma'am.
Okay. Now you are able to see this tools application, is it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Maybe I go into the presentation mode F5. I think it is not changing. Otherwise, let us see. Now, what are you seeing?
Historical development of
Historical
database.
development.
Okay, fine. Let me slide through some slides. Just tell me if you are able to see the change in the slides. You are able to. I have gone to the next slide. Can you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Next,
Yes, ma'am.
extending database capabilities. You are able to see now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. Then I will not go into the presentation mode. I think that's creating some problem. Let me do this. Is it visible to you all? No issues?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So next we will see what is in the historical development of how did this database technology come up to the level up to which it is today. Okay. In other words, in your syllabus, the same thing is being given as a brief history of database applications. Okay. So what are the different applications? How did it actually start off and to where it has come today? All right. Now that is what we are going to. I had left this. Didn't touch upon this concept in the as I didn't go in that particular order. Yeah, but now I want to finish that part and then proceed further. One minute. Yeah. So we started with early database applications like it was initially. We made use of hierarchical and network models, and it was generally done using some programming languages. So that means when I say programming languages, there was a lot of intermixing of conceptual concepts with the physical storage. There was no proper segregation of the different levels. We saw that there is a conceptual level, we have internal level, we have external schema and all that. There was no proper segregation. Everything was getting mixed up. That student information, the physical storage, everything was getting mixed up. That was a big problem when we started off with, when they started using these early systems like hierarchy. They used hierarchical models and network models. So another important shortcoming in that was in that earlier systems where they provided only programming language interface. Okay, you had to run a programming language to see to access your database. So by then what happened, it became very time consuming and expensive. Most of the database systems were all implemented in this large mainframe, expensive mainframe computers. So that time, so it became difficult. All these hierarchical systems, network model-based systems, file systems, all this were on mainframe. So that's why that was didn't work out or didn't flourish. But there was a lot of improvement that was brought in when there was a lot of flexibility that was brought in by this relational model based system. Now, in case when this relational database were originally proposed, something in 1970 by IBM and all that, so they proposed to separate this physical storage of data from the conceptual representation. That was a big advantage of this relational data model. They also introduced high-level query language. So till then, their query language was not there. As I told you, it was all done using the programming language itself. And that was very time-consuming and very expensive. When this relational database model came in, they introduced a high-level query language that provided an alternative to this programming language interface. So it was easier for us, or faster, quickly we could write some new queries. That was there. And the same applications which was done in the earlier database applications, relational systems also try to develop the same application, but they provided a lot of flexibility so that new queries could be developed quickly, and we could reorganize the database as the requirements changed. All this we could do in case of relational database. But earlier the systems, it was not easy to reorganize the database. Yeah. Next came is, after your relational database came your object-oriented applications and the need for more complex database. The moment this object-oriented database came in, that was actually, initially it was a big competitor for this relational database. But this origin, what was the important add-on when it came to object-oriented databases? They provided different object-oriented paradigm. Like when we talk about object-oriented programming, we always bring in abstraction, we bring in encapsulation, inheritance, identity, object identity, all these things. So these were brought in as a add-on compared to your relational database. That is how the database went on developing. Are you able to see the change of slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, good. Next, after this object-oriented database came in our web applications for e-commerce, right? That was a big boom. So this web application, provided web application, it provides a large network of interconnected computers. So users could create documents using a web language such as HTML, and then store these documents into web servers where other users or clients can also access them. Then you could also link all the documents using hyperlinks. So these kind of improvements were brought in. E-commerce emerged as a major application on the web. Okay, so a variety of techniques were developed to allow interchange of data. They used this HTML, they used extended markup language. All this, considered to be the primary standard, for interchanging data among various types of databases and web pages. So we started with hierarchical and network model kind of database, where they used, I'm just summarizing, where they used only the programming languages, and that was, there was no separation of these different schemas, and so everything was getting mixed up. There was a lot of mixing up of data, storage, everything. So next came what I told you. The next one that came into the picture was the relational database. So relational database brought in a new query language. People could write queries differently compared to your programming languages. They could reorganize the database very well. So that was a big boom when the relational database, people found it more easier to access the database than the previous or the earlier databases. Followed by this relational database came your object-oriented database. So when this object-oriented database came in, I said they were a big competitor for this relational database. So, but what add-ons they had brought in this object-oriented concepts into the database. They introduced encapsulation, they introduced inheritance, they used abstraction. So the abstraction and all made a very big impact on the database. And then came everything, beyond everything was your web. When everything came onto the web, e-commerce was a big boom. So it was very much easy for people to develop web pages, extract data from DBMS, put it onto the web page. All these techniques became very easy. So they had HTML kind of languages, XML kind of languages. All this became easier. Next, after this, they extended this database capabilities for new applications. What were the new applications? They went ahead. So they went for some kind of scientific applications. When I say scientific application, that scientific applications store large amount of data resulting from scientific experiments in areas such as physics, mapping of human genomes, genetics, biology. So everywhere, all the scientific applications started using these databases. Then storage and retrieval of some images, so let's say satellite images from some kind of medical procedures, X-rays, MRI scans, all this also could be put into the database. People started using database for all these kind of applications. Then storage and retrieval of videos, such as movies, video clips from news, personal cameras, all this also was added application. This database got extended, or the database got extended, database capabilities rather was extended for all these kind of applications also going ahead. Then data mining applications, where databases were used like anything to analyze large amount of data, searching for some particular patterns, relationships, these kind of applications, and they started using database. And then came, what can I say, spatial applications, wherein you had you started using databases for weather applications, weather information, geographical information systems. So what is the weather at some point of time, at a particular point of time, what is the weather, whether it will rain, whether there will be a cyclone. So these kind of things also they started using database. That means try to understand how this database got evolved, where we started and to what extent we have come today making use of databases, right? Even time series application, spatial application is one thing with respect to geographical points. Time series applications also can be used where you are using some kind of economic data. If you see the share market, that is also making use of a lot of databases at some point of time. What is the stock, what is the economy, so these things. So like this, what I'm trying to say is where how far we have come in terms of database is what I'm trying to make you understand. We started with very simple low level kind of database, and today we are using database in almost every aspect, very complex areas also this database is being used. That's about the brief history of how our database got evolved. And today we have come up to the emergence of big data technologies, MapReduce, where all we have big data analytics is used in several other applications. So that's how it's been a revolution, I should say. Right? Any questions so far? Any doubts? These are all quite theoretical concepts, but it is required when people talk of, in the examination also, you may have some questions on these, like write a brief note on the history of database applications. So there you have to write all these things, start from your hierarchical model, data model, then come to relational model, object-oriented model, then how the applications got extended to, how database got extended to different applications, like what I told you. So all these things you should be able to write it. I'll be sharing the notes, but you should also be able to catch up the concepts and do it. Any questions so far? Are you all there or not? That's my question to you.
Yes.
You're there, I know.
Yes, ma'am.
You're there. Are you listening? That's what I wanted to know, I said.
Yes.
Okay. Next, what did I say? You're able to see my slide, centralized DBMS architecture?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So now, let us see what do we mean by a centralized DBMS or a centralized architecture and a client-server architecture. So what is the difference between? Anybody, can you tell me what is a centralized DBMS and what is a client-server architecture? Can you all tell me? Can I have some answers? Let's make it interactive because you're all there, no, listening to me. So I think I can expect you all to answer something. Yes, Jayant. Jayant? I'll mark all of you absent, whoever is not going to answer me. I'll take it as you are not present there on the other side. Sushmita, you?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
You heard me now. I've asked you some question. Tell me. I want the answer. Okay. So now let us differentiate between centralized architecture and client-server architecture. Now, when we talk of centralized DBMS architecture, how they started off with this, what to say, architecture is database systems use these computers, similarly to means they had terminals. When I say terminal, it is only going to be a monitor to display. That's all. Terminals are also called as dumb systems or dumb terminals. Dumb terminals means you don't have any memory, you don't have any processing power in that computer. You can only access, do your computation, and again put it back onto the server. Put it back onto the main system. So that is how they all began with this DBMS. So centralized DBMS means these terminals or your dumb terminals were all connected to a central computer. So they had one computer in which the entire DBMS was running. Okay, all other users were all given just the terminals. Terminals means they can't save anything, they can't process anything. They only have to access the central computer and then work on this and again store it back into the central computer. That is how your centralized DBMS architecture started off. This particular figure shows that how it all started. You had a central computer, of course, you had some OS on which this DBMS software sits. Okay, and to this central computer, you have a number of terminal, terminals which are connected through the network. Now, once this hardware prices all started falling, then you could afford more systems. So that is when you had this client-server architecture. So as I said, you had this basic client-server architecture wherein you had, you tried to have some kind of specialized servers. So you had a server only for printing. You had a server which took care of all the files. You had a server which took care of all the web-related issues. So each one was called with its own name: print server, file server, web server, mail server. So like this. The client machines, because the hardware price reduced, what happened? You could get some client machines, and these were all called as server, and that led to a basic client server architecture. So like this. So if you are seeing here, we had a two-tier client server architecture. All the clients were on one side, but these were not dumb terminals. They had some kind of processing power with them. They had some kind of memory with them, so they could access each of whatever these. On the other side, there were some specialized servers, as I told you. So specialized servers means each server were able to do some kind of a functionality, like print server, file server, DBMS server, and so on. Right, so you could connect them. It was possible to connect a number of PCs or small workstations as clients to a file server that maintains the files of the client machines. Right. Similarly, you had another machine which could be designated as a printer server by being connected to various printers. Therefore, all print requests by the clients are forwarded to this particular machine. Web servers, email servers, they also fall into this specialized server category. Okay, the client machines, they provide the user with appropriate interfaces to utilize these servers, as well as the local processing power to run the local application. To these clients, you had users connected. So users used to connect to the client and take the request. The request was passed on to the corresponding server depending on what request they wanted, and then the result used to be going back to the client, and from the client back to the user. So this was a logical two-tier client-server architecture, or a basic client-server architecture. Now, you are seeing on your right side, there is something called as a physical two-tier client-server architecture. Now, what is a client? A client is usually a user machine that is going to provide some user interface capabilities to the user. Correct? Now, when a client requires access to additional functionality, okay, such as database access or something like that, it connects to the server that provides the needed functionality. So suppose client need not have all the functionalities. Suppose it wants, user is trying to ask a particular functionality which the server doesn't have. The client doesn't have. So it has to connect to the server and get it done. What is the server? Server is going to be a system containing both hardware and software that can provide services to the client machine. File access, it could be printing, it could be archiving, it could be database access, anything. So two main types of basic DBMS architectures were created. One is 2-tier, another one is 3-tier. 2-tier was there, 3-tier was there. You can go on up to n-tier, depending on how you are segregating the different layers. Okay. Now, in case of a client-server architecture, sometimes the system could be only the client and the server, or as you see on your right side, you could have a diskless client. You could have a client with a disk. You could have a server, a client which also acts as a server. That is also possible, or a server itself acts as a client also. So there are different types of client-server architecture can be actually incorporated. Okay, so there you have a client which has no disk. That means there is no storage in that at all. You have client which with a disk. You have a client which also acts as a server, right? So all these possibilities are possible. Now, going ahead, I told you that there were some a client program when this RDBMS and all came in. What happened? A client program can actually connect to several RDBMS and send the query and the transaction request using, you had something called ODBC. ODBC means Open Database Connectivity. It was a standard which was called as ODBC. It provides an API so that the client-side programs can call the DBMS and then get the necessary services accessed. Okay, any query results are sent back to the client program which can process or display the results as needed. In case of Java programming, you had something called JDBC, right? That allows the Java client programs to access the DBMS through a standard interface. I don't, these are certain things that general, all these concepts are very general. Then next we were only into this 2-tier client-server architecture. We could also go ahead and have a 3-tier architecture. Many web applications use an architecture called as 3-tier architecture. 3-tier means what? You are going to have an intermediate layer between the client and the server. This intermediate layer, or you call it even as the middle tier, right? Middle tier is sometimes called as an application server, or you sometimes call it as a web server, depending on the application. If you're using only for web, then you call it as a web server, or in any general application server. So this server, it plays an intermediate role, right? So what are the important applications? The tiers where they provide user interface, they provide application rules and data access. And on your right side, you are also seeing some presentation layer. What is presentation layer? Now this presentation layer, it displays the information to the user and it allows data entry. Okay, and you have presentation layer will always display the information to the user. User will always access the presentation layer only. I think you all would have studied in computer networks, like what are the different layers of a OSI model and all. There also you will come across this presentation layer. So presentation layer displays the information to the user and it allows data entry. Business logic layer, you have one layer there called as a business logic layer. What does that do? Now this business logic layer, it handles the intermediate rules and constraints before the data is passed up to the user or even down to the DBMS. That means if there are any constraints on the data, if there are any rules that are to be applied onto the data, before you give it to the user also, it will look into it. Or whatever you are getting from the user, before you give it to the database service database, into the database, there also it will take a look into it. And then you have the bottom layer, which includes all the database management services. Now, if I split this, you have a database service layer. Now, if I try to split this into a web server and a database server, then it becomes a 4-tier architecture. Now, what you are seeing here is a example of a 3-tier architecture. Like you have a presentation layer, as I said, it will connect to the users. You have a business logic layer, which is going to take care of the business rules, like any constraints, data constraints, all that. Then you have a database services layer. Now, this database service layer, if I try to split this database service layer, okay, so that means I split this database server into 2 parts, let us say. One database server, one web server, or I try to give a mail server, something like this. I try to split this. Then that architecture will become a 4-tier architecture. Like that, I can go on further splitting it into finer components so that I can give rise to a n-tier architecture where n can be 4 or 5. This business logic layer also can be divided into multiple layers. Okay. This n-tier applications, they afford the advantage that any one tier can run on an appropriate processor or operating system and can be handled independently. That means every tier can be handled independently. Okay, that is what the advantage of using this. This is what I was trying to tell you. What is an entire bottom layer in the 3-tier architecture includes all the data management service. I can always split that bottom layer and then I can make it as a 4-tier architecture. One more important concept that we are going to learn is classification of DBMS. How can you classify it? What are the different types of DBMS that we have? Now, here I have not specified it, but the first, there are several criteria, before there are several criteria to classify the DBMS. The first is the data model. First is I have not shown that in the slide, listen to me. The first is the data model on which the DBMS is based. For example, the main data model used in the current commercial DBMS means our Oracle kind of DBMS. So you can have a relational data model, or you can have an object data model, or you can have applications which still run on database systems based on hierarchical and network data models. So based on data models, I can try to classify the DBMS. I can have hierarchical and network data model, that is one type of DBMS. I can have an object-oriented data model, that is another type of DBMS. I can have relational data model. I can have DBMS based on relational data model, that is another type of DBMS. So the first criteria on which you are going to classify this DBMS is the data models. Right. Next, we are one important criterion, next important criterion which is used for classifying the DBMS is the number of users which are supported by the system. Okay, number of users means you can have single user system. Single user system means what? It supports only one user at a time and are mostly used along with PCs. Maybe generally I have a database for myself. I am the only user. I run it in my own PC. So that is a single user system. So DBMS can be classified based on the number of users also. Another one is multi-user system. So this includes majority of DBMS. They support concurrent multiple users. So we have already seen examples of multi-user DBMS or multi-user database, right? Where every one particular database is being used by so many of us. The third criterion is the number of sites over which the database is going to be distributed. So you have a centralized DBMS, as I told you, you have, if the data is stored at a single computer, then you call it as a centralized DBMS. It can support multiple users, but the DBMS and the database reside on a single computer. Okay, it can support, centralized DBMS also can support multiple users, but the DBMS is residing on a single computer. Whereas when you talk of a distributed DBMS, you can have this actual database and the DBMS software to be distributed over many sites, and they're all connected by a network. Right? Again, here in distributed DBMS, you have two different types. One is homogeneous homogeneous distributed DBMS, and then you have heterogeneous DBMS. What is the difference? Homogeneous means the same database software is used on multiple sites. Heterogeneous means you try to have some different data, pre-existing autonomous databases stored under different DBMS, right? So these are the different ways in which you can classify. One last criterion is cost. Based on cost also, it is, they say we can classify DBMS, but it is very difficult to propose any kind of classification of DBMS based on cost. We have open source DBMS products like MySQL and all that are supported by third-party vendors with some additional services that they may give. But generally, and there are some license-based also DBMS also. But generally, we say it is not very easy to propose any kind of classification of DBMS based on cost. But still, we consider that as a criterion to do it. So what are the different classification criteria that we saw? One is based on, the first one is based on data model. So data model means you can have DBMS which is based on hierarchical or network data model. You can have a DBMS based on the relational data model. You can have DBMS based on the object-oriented data model. That is the first classification of DBMS. So first criterion of DBMS. How do you what is the criteria for classifying DBMS? First one is based on the kind of data model that they have. The second criterion is, as we are seeing here in the slide, second criterion is to classify DBMS based on the number of users which are supported by the system. I keep repeating some of the points so that once if you have not listened to or you are not getting it, you can always listen to it again. So second criterion used to classify the DBMS is the number of users which are supported by the system. So you can have DBMS which are single user system. You can have DBMS which are multi-user systems also. And then the third criterion is to the number of sites on which the database is distributed. So you can have a centralized DBMS. You can have a distributed DBMS. So distributed means a database is distributed. You have the same database at several places, then you call it as a homogeneous DBMS. If you have different databases at different places, but still you are trying to connect and do it, then you call it as a heterogeneous DBMS. Fourth criterion, as I said, is the cost. But generally, it is not very easy to talk about the classification of DBMS based on cost. So this is what I told, based on data model, which I told in the beginning itself. Hierarchical data model. You can have a DBMS based on network data model. You can have a DBMS based on object data model, relational data model. Object relational data model can be combined also. You can have it on network model. So this is another type of classification of DBMS. Right. This is hierarchical and all that. I've given some examples. Relational data model. We'll be learning about this relational data model much in detail when we go to the second unit. So not to worry about it much now. You have to know what are the criteria on which the database is DBMS is classified. But then that's okay. To go into the details of it, we can take it up in the next unit. Object relational data model. So today's class we saw, just to summarize quickly, we started with the database system environment. We stopped from there in that last class. I started from there again today. Then we saw what are the different tools or utilities rather, which are required for the DBA to manage the DBMS. We saw some of the utilities. Then we went into a brief history of database applications, how database has evolved, what is the kind of revolution that the database has undergone. That's one thing. Then we went into the client server, what is actually a centralized architecture and a client server architecture for DBMS. So you can have a centralized DBMS also, which was the initial way of organizing this DBMS. We can also have a client server architecture. Again, in client server architecture, you can have the basic model of two-tier architecture where you have the client and you have the server. You can also kind of scale it up. You can go in for a 3-tier architecture wherein you bring in this business logic layer in between the client and the server, or in between the presentation layer and the database layer. Then I said you can still go ahead and make it as a entire architecture, wherein you can split this database layer or the database server into several specific servers, servers which are going to do some specific functionalities. You can try to split them. So then that is that way it becomes a 4-tier architecture or a 5-tier architecture, rather a entire architecture. That is what we saw. Then we went into what is the classification of DBMS? What are the criteria based on which you can classify the DBMS? Okay. Any questions? Right. Absolutely no questions there. What I should understand? You understood everything or nothing at all? I don't know.
Good, ma'am.
Yeah, good. At least I heard somebody saying that. Well, this today's class was rather quite very theoretical. We cannot help, but I think next class onwards, tomorrow 4th hour, I'll be taking a theory class only, because since we have done sufficiently enough in the first lab session yesterday, so tomorrow's lab instruction class, I'll be continuing with the theory concepts only. Okay, and I think tomorrow's class onwards, we will make we'll have some interesting topics as in the DBMS. Notes I will be giving, don't worry about that. Once I finish, I will not share notes as and when I do, or PPTs as and when. I don't believe in this sharing of PPTs to you all, because I don't think you'll be able to make your own notes out of that. So at the end of every module, I'll be sharing some notes with you all, which will help you all in, and I'll also share some important questions of that module, so that you can find some answers in the same notes in which I give. Prepare yourself to how you can write or answer your question paper. All right. So that's a basic idea. But every day I cannot keep sharing some notes with you all. That may not be possible from my side. Okay. Beyond this, you want something from my side, like you want it to be a little different, then you can tell me. Lab session yesterday we did, was that okay for you all, or you want some change in the way we do? I need some answers from you. Yeah. No one answered.
Fine, ma'am.
Yeah, good. Anaga, answer your attendance.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, only that you will all answer. Whatever else I ask, you all won't answer. Abhilash?
Yes, ma'am.
Akhil?
Yes, ma'am.
You never attended yesterday's lab, Akhil.
Ma'am,
Aku?
Yes, ma'am.
Anusha?
Yes, ma'am.
Aravind?
Present, ma'am.
Harifula?
Yes, ma'am.
Benakaraj? Banu Prakash?
Yes, ma'am.
Bhargav?
Yes, ma'am.
Rahmatullah?
Present, ma'am.
Present, ma'am.
Chandana? Charan?
Present, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Darshan?
Present, ma'am.
Diksha? Dakshayani?
Present, ma'am.
Kishan?
Benaka present.
Okay. Kishan?
Present, ma'am.
Harshit?
Present, ma'am.
Hemlata?
Present, ma'am.
Uma?
Present, ma'am.
Jayant? Okay. Divya? Kaushik?
Present, ma'am.
Lakshmi?
Ma'am, her mic issue, it seems, ma'am.
Okay. Lavanya?
Present, ma'am.
Manisha? Sorry, Manish. Sorry.
Ma'am, present, ma'am.
Sorry, Manish, I'm sorry. Manoj?
Present, ma'am.
Mohit?
Yes, ma'am.
Naval?
Yes, ma'am.
Navya?
Present, ma'am.
Nikhil?
Present, ma'am.
Manindra,
Present, ma'am.
Pavan,
Present, ma'am.
Pooja,
Present, ma'am.
Purnima,
Present, ma'am.
Raman,
Yes, ma'am.
Rashmi,
Yes, ma'am.
Rupak,
Yes, ma'am.
Sai Kumar,
Present, ma'am.
Samir,
Present, ma'am.
Santosh,
Present, ma'am.
Sadak,
Present, ma'am.
Sharon,
Yes, ma'am.
Shashank,
Present, ma'am.
Sheetal,
Present, ma'am.
Shivani,
Present, ma'am.
Soumya.
Ma'am, she is present, ma'am. Her mic is not working.
Okay. Spurti,
Present, ma'am.
Vishnu,
Present, ma'am.
Sugandhini,
Present, ma'am.
No,
Present, ma'am.
Shrita BS, Sushmita, you?
Present, ma'am.
Yes.
Present, ma'am.
Yeah. Tirtha, Tripti,
Present, ma'am.
Varsha,
Present, ma'am.
Veena.
Present, ma'am.
Yeah. So, who's
Ma'am,
absent?
Benaka present, ma'am.
Okay, Benaka is present. Deeksha is absent today. I have not heard her.
Ma'am, Divya present, ma'am.
Yeah, Divya, I got you. Okay, students, I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.